Terry here again. I would like to introduce to you Steve. He's a producer from the state of Iowa. Steve has sent us several emails over the last year commenting about how our service is working on his behalf. This one is a rather long one, but Steve is a very unique soul. In his very first email to the company, he said 1 year of service didn't mean much to him. He said if he was still with us in 5 years, now that would mean a lot. He wants a consistency of service. Whereas he knows no one will get it right all the time, he does expect one to be consistent. To my surprise, he has written a few more times since then. Steve is no country bumpkin. So let's look at what we see as Steve's intuitive, very intelligent, insightful, and forthright comments. Again, this comes to us from Steve from the state of Iowa. Steve wrote this on July 9th of last year, 2012, and his note says to us, I have spoken with you on the telephone very few times, but I definitely enjoyed the conversations and always concluded the conversations with thoughts that you are honest, straightforward, and I find you very trusting. Reading your commentary for 1 year has given me enough of a glimpse into the paradigm which you view the markets, and I at least feel somewhat comfortable with your advice. Now, I want to point out two things Steve said here because we are introducing an entirely new paradigm to you, a whole different thought structure, because you need to get the best results possible, and what is offered today doesn't do that. Steve already sees that. He knows what we're trying to accomplish. But he also comes back and says, I feel somewhat comfortable with your advice. So he's with us a year, he's starting to get a little comfortable. Remember, we mentioned that he said it'll take 5 years before he's really going to trust someone because he wants to see a consistency of service. So he goes on to say, now this might sound rather pessimistic on my part, but when it comes to market commentary, I find it to be very dangerous business practice to give any advisor the benefit of the doubt. Rather, I read market commentary with the expectation that you have to earn my trust by giving me sound advice. And that's what we expect from you guys too. We expect you to demand this from us here at Decadian. So it goes on to say, thus far, you have not disappointed me. So with 1 year of service, we're okay. Now we're starting year 2. My biggest fear in following your advice is that you appear to be a lone ranger, and that is fine as long as you're on your game, but what happens if your game is off? Ultimately, it is always my decision to sell the quantity of grain I choose, at the price I choose, or still hold a future date when I hope the price will be higher. That sounds so simple, but it is an emotional roller coaster that greatly affects my farm's profitability. Which brings me back to why I pay for your advice to hopefully make me a wiser grain marketer with what I do. Thanks for giving me sound marketing advice for the past year. Okay, now Steve came back to us in January of 2013, that's this year, on the 15th. And this email to us says, I count on you to give me the long-term market forecast. That is a very difficult and intimidating task. Again, we want to comment offhand here that we still think Steve is extremely insightful on this whole thing because he realizes what we do here at Ag Masters and what we have taken into Decadian is a long-term market analysis, not short-term. We're not looking for trading day by day. This is long-term at the least risk possible. So Steve goes in and says, please do not change what you do. You are both a deep thinker and a broad thinker. I enjoy reading your commentary. It is full of useful and interesting information. It requires some thought on my part. I get very little out of it if I read it fast. I have to take my time and consider it carefully. Most importantly, despite all of the great information and thoughts, you always remember the bottom line, the recommendation to sell or not to sell. Then 3 months later, on March 12, 2013, Steve comes back with another email. To Terry and the entire Ag Masters crew, I just wanted to send you a brief note to say thank you for the customer appreciation dinner. We enjoyed visiting with the other subscribers at our table. It was nice to see the many faces behind Ag Masters. In this technological age of email and online discussions, I really value meeting the people with whom I do business in person. You did not disappoint. Terry, your message was consistent with what you have said all along. And Ryan, Very interesting. Lastly, I thank you for good advice. While reviewing my grain sales for 2012, it was very apparent that AgMaster's solid advice made a positive difference in my profitability. If it wasn't for your advice, I'm sure I would have sold all my 2011 corn long before the price cleared $8. So we appreciate Steve's comments. We appreciate his candor. And what he is saying is what we hope you see in us too, and that we expect to fully deliver to you with Decadia. And I do want to thank you very much for taking the time to listen to my commentary.